Hey everyone, welcome back to the homestead. Today I was doing a walk around my garden and I realized some of my plants in here need pruned or trimmed back. So I figured I would do a couple little videos for you guys on how I like to prune my various vegetables and kind of give you some maintenance tips for your garden as things grow to keep them manageable. Now keep in mind that every zone is going to be different. Your climate's going to be a little bit different, and so how you want to prune your vegetables might be a little bit different for you than it is for me. But I just want to share my personal experience with pruning things and how it's been working for me here in Zone 6A. We are in Southwest Pennsylvania, and my particular area here is very wet and kind of humid and moist all year. We have a large creek that runs across the front of our property. And we kind of live like in this bowl like valley. It's not like a steep valley, it's more like a bowl. And so it holds moisture very well. And so some of the things that I prune for in my plants is to help maintain airflow and prevent molds and mildews from forming on my plants and things like that, funguses and that kind of thing that happens with a more moist environment. So today I'm just going to talk about tomatoes a little bit, how I like to prune my tomatoes for them to grow on a trellis, and give you guys a little bit of information on determinate tomatoes versus indeterminate tomatoes. So let me get some pruners and get you guys set up on a tripod and we will get started. So there are a ton of different tomato varieties out there. You've got your red tomatoes, your yellow tomatoes, your purple tomatoes, all of that. And they come in so many different shapes and colors and flavors and all of that. And there's just so much variety. Three that I have come to personally love are the Italian heirloom, the black plum, and the San Marzano. I really love the Italian heirloom for its big meatiness. I mean, they're big tomatoes, and they're great for canning diced tomatoes, salsa, things like that, where the tomatoes are a little bit more on the chunky side and they have a little bit less juice to them and seeds. So I find them just a really great canning tomato for, like I said, the diced tomatoes and the salsa, things that are a little bit more chunky. And then the black plum and the San Marzano are considered paste tomatoes. So again, they're a really meaty tomato and they have a little bit of juice and less seeds. So they make a really great sauce tomato. So it's really great for your spaghetti sauces, your pizza sauce, your tomato paste, and things like that. And I just really like their flavor composition, their textures, and their juices. And so it's just one of those things that, you know, you just fall in love with a certain variety and that's what you grow. And that's what happened here. So I'm going to show you how I like to prune my varieties. Now there are two types of tomatoes amongst all of the varieties of tomatoes. You've got your indeterminate and your determinate tomatoes. Your indeterminate tomatoes are tomatoes that tend to keep growing and keep producing fruit. So they're going to be more viney and do really well on a trellis system. And they're going to keep producing fruit until your last frost. Whereas the determinate tomatoes tend to grow a little bit more bushy and not quite as viney. And they produce all of their fruit basically at the same time. So they're really great for canning when you want all of your fruit at once. And if you have a shorter growing season, because it produces all of its fruit at once. So that's some of the main differences between indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. You can dive more in depth with those, but that's kind of where my knowledge lies as far as determinate versus indeterminate goes. I just know that one will continue to grow and one produces its fruit all at one time. Now the two of my varieties are indeterminate and one is a determinate. The determinate variety is the San Marzano. And when it comes to pruning, the determinate tomatoes are kind of self-pruning, so you don't need to tend to them as much as you would need to tend to your vining fruits. with the exception of like the first like month of growth outside after you plant them. In my climate, I prune pretty heavily because I want a lot of airflow in my plants so we don't get the powdery mildew and other funguses and things like that on my plants. So I do a lot of heavy pruning here. So even with my determinate tomato, I do tend to prune them a little bit heavier than say a different climate. But again, it's going to be different depending on where you're growing, what your climate's like, what your grow zone is, and how long your grow season is as well. So I'm going to show you on my indeterminates what I like to do through the entire course of their growth period, and kind of just teach you in that way, because I tend to prune all of my tomatoes in that way regardless of them being an indeterminate or a determinate tomato, because I want all of that airflow. So let me get you turned around and I'll show you how I like to prune my tomatoes. So these tomatoes here are my black plum tomatoes, and I already started kind of pruning them a little bit before I realized I should make a video. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that there's no leaves or suckers on like the first 2 feet of plant. Now this is going to prevent any water from splashing up from the ground onto the leaves. Tomatoes don't like getting wet. They're just prone to all of those mildewy diseases and issues. So keeping as much airflow in your tomatoes as possible is going to keep them healthy and happy. And especially here in my climate where things tend to stay a bit more on the moist side, I like to make sure that they're getting that airflow that they need. So pruning it from, about 2 feet up allows for there to be no splashback from rain onto leaves, and allows for more airflow around the base of the plant, which encourages a healthy plant. So as you can see, I've kind of nipped off all of the leaf and sucker growth and up to the top of the plant. Once the plants get big enough, I'm going to start weaving them or pushing them over gently to start weaving through my trellis here and growing up the trellis. All right, so as you can see on this tomato here, we've got suckers, which are this little growth here that comes up between the stalk and the leaf. We want to get rid of those. As the tomato grows, I like to get rid of these up until it's about 4 feet high, and then I'll let a few of them grow out. And then I'm going to take off all of this foliage down here to open up this stalk a little bit and allow for more airflow. So we're going to get rid of this one. These ones back here, this one, and this one here. Now, if you want to, you can save those suckers that you pulled off and stick them in some dirt, and they will grow a clone of your mother plant, and you'll have more tomatoes. Now, I don't have room for all of these tomatoes, so if I really wanted to, I could sell these as starts. But for today, I'm just gonna leave these, go to the compost, because this plant is going to continue to produce those suckers for the entire season. So if I really need more tomatoes, it's not gonna be hard for me to get them. So as you can see, now that we've got all of that pruned away, there's a nice clean stalk here. I'll get rid of some of these weeds. And that's gonna allow for lots of airflow and dryness along the stem of the plant. And then I will just gently push this over and start weaving it into the cattle panel trellis. It might not be tall enough at this point. It might be. But as it grows taller, I'm probably gonna let it grow a couple more inches before I start tucking it into the cattle panel here. For right now, I just want to make sure that it's pruned and getting the airflow that it needs as it grows. So I'm going to come through on this second one here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut off the bottom leaves that are closer to the ground, and Oh, this leaf is like in the way. We're going to pull all of those suckers off so it focuses on the main growth of the plant, which is what we want for those first starts of the season. These plants are already starting to produce some flower shoots, and I don't really want flowers right now. I want them to focus on their main growth, so I will take those as well. More over here, and I tend to just pinch these off with my nails because they're so small. And there you have it. So now you can see that my tomatoes have lots of airflow down by the ground and underneath their leaves, so we're not going to have a lot of that splashback from rain, and it's going to allow just for a lot of airflow around the branches. So I will just continue to do that with all of my tomato varieties. Like I said, I even do this on the determinate tomatoes for that first 2 feet of stalk growth to allow for lots of airflow at the base of the plant and to prevent that splashback from rain. And then I might slow down on the suckers and the flowers and whatnot on the determinate tomatoes. Whereas the indeterminate tomatoes, I will heavily prune suckers because I want a single leader vine that's easily trainable to my trellises. And then as the season progresses, depending on how the plant is growing, will determine also how I continue to prune it. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue pruning my tomatoes and getting them all cleaned up and ready for trellising. This is another reason why I heavily prune. I plant things more like the square foot gardening method, where everything's kind of squished in together. Like I've got cucumbers growing here, a pepper, and my tomato plants that will eventually grow on the vine. So when I prune them, it just opens up this space between the plants a little bit better to maximize airflow and grow space. Now these are my Italian heirlooms. They're growing a little bit bigger, a little bit faster than the other varieties. Plus they have like these really long, beautiful leaf sets. Now sometimes with the Italian heirlooms, their leaves get so big that they start to overlap each other, as you can kind of see over here. We've got this branch that's growing over here into the pepper, and this one here off of this plant that's now growing underneath. Now as this plant gets bigger, I'm going to leave it for today because they're still small and they need their leaves to produce food for themselves, and it's not really causing a problem at the time. But later on down the road, these leaves that will cross over each other are going to prevent sunlight and airflow. So these would get cut off as well later on down the road. But for today, I'm just gonna leave them. Paying attention to how your tomatoes are growing in regards to the closeness of each other is gonna help with diseases as well. Keeping them, that airflow is so important. I can't say it enough. Having good airflow between your tomato plants and their leaves and all of that is going to prevent so much disease within your plants. So keeping them pruned and maintained is going to really help your tomatoes thrive, and you get the best harvest from them as you possibly can. So just to recap, I prune everything off of the plant for like the first 2 feet of the stalk. So that's from the soil up, and that's about 2 feet. Now this is going to happen gradually over time as they grow. You don't want to lop it all off until you only have 2 leaves at the top. That's not going to help your plants any. Do it as they grow. So it's going to be a gradual thing over the season that you prune that first 2 feet back. Once you get past that 2 feet, you're just going to want to prune the suckers. And this way you have a main leader on your plant, and you're not going to overwhelm the plant with having to provide so much nutrients for so much plant. If you have a smaller, more maintained plant, it's going to be able to focus a lot of energy and time into that fruit production once it gets fully grown. And that's pretty much it. It's really simple to keep your tomatoes pruned and well maintained for optimal growth and health and fruit production and all of that. And I found this method to work really well for me here. I live in zone 6A, and our particular area is very moist. We maintain a lot of wetness here in my area, and so this just really helps with the mold and fungus issues that tomatoes can have. Pay attention to your climate zone and how your tomatoes are behaving, how they're growing, diseases and issues that you've had problems with in the past, and that's really going to help you narrow down the best way to prune your tomatoes for your specific area, for your specific needs, and so on. This is just one way that works really well for me, and I wanted to share it because it might work really well for some of you as well. So I hope that you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please hit that like button on your way out. And if you are not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. It lets you know when new videos are up on the channel so you don't miss anything new. And it really supports me as a YouTuber and helps me get really great content out to you guys on a consistent basis. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, I am starting to do live Q&A videos at the end of every month. I'm going to be doing them on the last Friday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you tune in to catch those and ask me all of your questions. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching, and remember to grow where you're planted.